You're listening to Keeping Up with the Knights, a podcast for the faculty and staff at Steele High School, allowing them to connect outside of the classroom. Teacher, coach, mentor, and speaker Michael Herrera, a past District Teacher of the Year, will sit down with fellow teachers and bring their stories to life. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these stories as they unfold on this episode of Keeping Up with the Knights.
Well, welcome to another episode of Keeping Up with the Knights. I have the pleasure of sitting down with a first-year teacher at Steele High School, right?
Yes.
Catherine Smietana. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to sit down and talk with me, and hopefully our audience here at Steele High School gets to know you a little bit. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you bet. So first thing I like to do at the beginning of my podcast is always start off by asking my guests 5 get-to-know-you questions that I call bell ringers, right? We all kind of have a warm-up in our classroom, or at least most teachers do some kind of a warm-up in the class. And so I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and then you'll shoot 5 back at me. You ready to go?
I think so.
All right. Question number 1. If you were not a teacher, what other profession would you be doing right now?
Ooh. That's a difficult one. I don't know. I think it would be cool to do a professional travel blogger, traveling the world and blogging about it. I think that would be pretty awesome. But right now with COVID, probably would be out of a job.
Well, so let me ask you a second. This is not a second question, but it's a follow-up question to that. Do you currently blog or vlog yourself?
No. So it would be new.
All right. Well, you got to start, man. That's like with this podcast thing, when COVID happened and I saw all these people doing Zooms, and I'm like, man, I can just easily get onto Zooms and interact with people and stuff. And so I started doing some research, and what kept coming up was vlogging. And I was like, what the heck is a vlog and a blog? And so I'm kind of brushed up a little bit on that now, but you should take that upon yourself to do that. But all right. Question number 2, what is something that no one would ever know about you?
Something that no one would ever know about me, I think would be, people get confused with my last name. So they see Smietana and then they see me and they're like, oh, it's automatically Hispanic. Smietana is actually Polish.
Okay.
So my family is of Polish descent. So
what percentage of Polish are you?
The majority. I did the DNA test from ancestry.com. And the majority of my history is, I think, 76% from Europe. So It's pretty interesting to see.
So are your parents both Polish?
No. So my dad is Polish. He's originally from Philadelphia, and my mom is Hispanic, and she's originally from Southern California.
Very well. All right. Well, I'm half Greek and half Hispanic. So
yeah, same.
You go.
Exactly.
There you go. All right. Question number 3. If you could play the role of any movie star or character, what would that be?
Any movie role.
Or even character.
I am currently, what am I watching right now? I've been watching The Librarians. It's an older show, right? Okay. And there's a character named Cassandra, and she is this genius who can basically see math and science. And math and science have been my worst subjects. So if I could be any character, just seeing what she goes through as her character, I think that's who I would pick.
All right. Very good. All right. Question number 4. Is there on your, do you have a DVR, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the last show that you recorded on your DVR?
Last show I recorded on my DVR. I believe it was an episode of The Alienist from TNT. Okay.
All right. Fair enough. Question number 5. What is your favorite cereal?
Favorite cereal? It's going to be between regular Frosted Flakes or Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Have you had the chocolate Frosted Flakes?
I haven't.
Oh
Are they
my
good?
gosh.
Game changer?
It's pretty much always in my cabinet now because I don't really care for Frosted Flakes, but when I saw the chocolate Frosted Flakes, why not give it a try? It's amazing.
Okay, I'm going to have to try it now.
Chocolate Frosted Flakes is where it's at. Well, those are my 5 questions. It's your turn. Go ahead and shoot 5 away.
Okay, so age-old debate, cats or dogs?
I'm definitely a dog person. It wasn't until I met my wife, and she has this like major like fascination with cats. Like she's like the little cat lady. She's the cat whisperer. Like when I met her, she was so fascinated by it. But I grew up in a house where we had the cat lady next door to us. Ooh. And she literally like just had just massive amounts of cats in the house, out of the house. And it reeked. It just smelled bad. Yes, like that. It was a low economic neighborhood as well. So you can just imagine just all of that. So I grew up with a disdain towards
cats.
I hated cats. And then I met my wife and we got married. We moved down here. We moved down here in 2005. Yeah, 2005. And my mom, who used to work at the church at St. Pius off of Harry Wurzbach in 410, they found a little baby kitten in the church.
Oh, wow.
And so, of course, I was like, oh, it's a Christian cat, right? So my mom knew that my wife liked cats. And she's like, hey, I've got this cat. I know Courtney likes cats. Would you like to give her a cat? And I'm like, heck no.
No.
But of course, then that soft side of me is like, oh, my gosh, my wife would love me forever, right? Mm-hmm. And so now we have a cat, same cat. So that cat's golly, 15 years old.
Oh, wow.
Her name is Lily, and cats are not the worst thing on the world. But if I had to pick between the two, it's dogs.
It's dogs. Do you have dogs?
I used to have a little pug. Her name was Sugar, but she was also old and she was put down probably maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
And the cat's still there.
Cat's still there.
Okay, next question. What is your favorite sport to watch?
I had this question earlier. It's kind of hard for me because being a basketball coach, I don't know if you knew that about me, but I coach basketball. It's definitely basketball, but that's kind of like the go-to answer because I coach it. But it's a toss-up for me for different reasons. I love watching college football, but I also really enjoy watching golf, even though I know it's a really slow-paced kind of thing. I'm a landscape person. Like I love nature. I love the trees. I love the sounds. The flowers and most, professional golf courses are just manicured pristinely.
Yes, very well. Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of appreciation of the sport and appreciation of like landscape and nature that I like a lot. So, but I like college football and I like golf.
All righty. Okay. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
In the States or in the world? I guess you said world, right?
World, yeah.
That's a tough one because I don't know if I'd want to live in Europe or if I'd want to live in the States. It's a tough question. I love Greece so much, but I don't know enough about like living their longevity, right? Like a long time or the economic status of all that. So let's just go with the States. If I were to live anywhere in the States, I would say it'd be somewhere close to a beach. Because I love nature. I love being outdoors and I love the beach. I don't need like the hustle and bustle of a beach, but just a quiet tranquility of the beach and the sounds and being able to like take a walk on the beach. So, somewhere close to a beach would be my answer with no specific place. Okay.
That sounds good. Okay. What is your biggest pet peeve?
Ooh, I've got so many. The first one that comes to my mind, which is probably not the best one, is no eye contact when I'm talking to somebody.
Really?
So as an educator and as a coach, I even said it today. I said it today to my class, to some of my students, the best way you listen is with your eyes, then your ears. And so I'm a big eye contact person. So I'd have to say one of my biggest pet peeves is avoiding eye contact when I'm speaking to somebody.
And last one, which time of year do you dread the most?
What time? Oh gosh. Process of elimination here. I hate the really, really hot.
I agree. Me too.
So I would have to say like, it's probably like maybe the beginning of the school year, but not because of the beginning of the school year, because I love the beginning of the school year, but it's because of the weather and leaving at 4:00 and then my truck says that it's 111 degrees. I hate the extreme hot, But if I'm exercising and working out on the track and running and stuff, I love the heat. But it'd have to be that time of year when it's like fresh into the school year, but it's just too darn
It's just
hot.
too hot. Yeah. When you're too busy and going.
Absolutely.
I hear you. I do. All right. Those are my 5 questions.
All right. Fantastic. Well, let's go ahead and get this started. So I always like to start by asking the same question to start off. And that's just, I don't know you, you don't know me, but this podcast is not about me. It's about you. And to give, Steele High School a chance to kind of get to know you as well. And I will say this, that when I was telling people that I was doing a podcast with you today, they said, who?
Who? Exactly. It's like Steele had a mass influx of people just come in.
And so that is why precisely I'm doing this podcast, not just with you, but just with everybody, because we get into our little bunker and we get into our classrooms and we might have a relationship with the people that are close to us in our hallways, but there's really not time for us to connect outside of the classroom on a personal level to get to know people. So for more reasons than one, here's why I'm doing this podcast with you, because I don't want people to say, who is Miss Smietana? Like, no, here is who she is. Let's listen to her. Let's get to know her. And then hopefully more people will be able to call you by your name. So again, pleasure to meet you here. But what I like to start off with is just talk a little bit about your childhood, kind of like where you grew up, and then a little bit about your childhood life.
Okay, so growing up, I lived all over the United States. It wasn't necessarily military. My dad was in the Border Patrol. So I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, and then we moved to Imperial, California. From Imperial, we went to Holton, Maine, and that was definitely a big difference. Of course, as a kid, you love the snow, right? As an adult, you're like, no, not the snow. So I did enjoy Maine a lot. From Maine, I did most of my schooling and the majority of my growing up in Laredo, Texas. So I like to call Laredo my home.
Okay.
About halfway through the first semester of freshman year, we moved again. And that was to a small town called Alpine, Texas, towards the Big Bend National Park area.
Oh, wow.
Very small, very rural, big difference from Laredo.
Yeah.
So I finished off high school there, and then I continued my school there. So I went to Sul Ross State University, got my BA and my master's both there.
Okay.
After that,
what are those degrees in?
Okay, so my BA is in communication, and then I went on and got my master's in education. I always told myself I was never going to be a teacher. Here I am. Never say never, but I do love it. So after grad school, Alpine, again, very limited on what I was able to accomplish there. So after grad school, I was invited to go move out to California with my sister and my brother-in-law. Okay. So we made the move, and that's where I started my teaching career. COVID hit. Things were changing, and we're like, you know what? I think it's time that we head back to Texas. And so now we're back in Texas, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm really glad I made the move.
How long were you in California?
5 years.
Oh, okay. All right. You made it sound like you were there for a short, like you went up there and came right back.
No, 5 years in California.
Okay. And so when you were there in California, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but what did you teach there? So
I continued, actually I started off, it was my very first teaching job, English. So taught freshmen, sophomores, juniors, didn't have the pleasure of teaching seniors. And while I was there, I was also the head cheer coach over there for 5 years as well.
Okay. And so let's fast forward a little bit now. So now you're teaching English. What English do you teach? And I think you're also helping out with cheer or dance, right?
Dance, yes. Okay. So I'm teaching English 2 this year. And I'm helping out Coach Sweet with the dance.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure she appreciates that.
I appreciate her. It's definitely a different world from cheerleading, but I'm learning a lot. I'm really enjoying it. She's officially converted me.
Well, I've known her for a while, and I also have known her husband for a while too, because we've coached basketball against each other, and then we certainly play our share of golf on the golf course every once in a while. So, well, let's go back to something that you said. You said that you taught freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, and then you did not have the pleasure of teaching seniors. Talk a little bit about that. What do you mean by that?
So every year that I taught thus far, or even when I was in California, every year I changed what I was teaching. I felt like the only thing that remained consistent was at least having a couple of classes of freshmen. But for the majority of the part, I was always going back and forth between freshmen, sophomores, and junior English. But I was never had the opportunity to go to English 4. So didn't have that opportunity.
I got you. Yeah, no, it's definitely a unique experience being able to teach the freshmen and then the seniors.
Oh, yes.
Because I teach health science classes, so sometimes we get them at their early freshman, sophomore year, but I also teach medical assisting, which is our juniors and seniors. So it's always fun just seeing that progression of,
it is definitely.
Well, good deal. All right, so you said you went to Sul Ross. Share some experiences that have stood with you over the years through your college years. And it can be socially, it could be academically, professionally. Just kind of share something that you remember back from your college years.
Well, I feel like I had a great opportunity going to Sul Ross. Not only was it affordable, but it was a very intimate experience in the fact that it was such a small school that I knew all my professors. They all knew me by name, right? I knew all of my classmates. And even to this day, I still have some of my professors who, when I'm in town, would come over to the house, just on a social level, just get to talk and see what life is like and what's currently going on at Sul Ross. So I feel like having that experience and being able to experience that is not a lot that other people can say as far as their college experience goes, because you see these colleges now that are just getting so big and they're like, oh, I have hundreds of kids in my class. And I'm just like, you know what, I'm sure it's an awesome experience, but at the same time, I never got to experience it. And in a way, I don't really miss the fact that I didn't experience that because my experience was so positive.
How many students go to school there?
I want to say Steele is probably bigger than the university.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So on maybe 2,000, maybe. Okay. So it's a small D3.
Okay, I got you. So I went to the University of Tulsa, which is a small Division I, but we had 4,200 students, and that included the law school. So it's not very much bigger than what we have here, 2,600. But I completely agree with you. I really wanted that tight-knit, kind of family-oriented university where I wasn't just a number, that I got to know my professors, and those experiences that I had in college where the professor would say, hey, let's pack up, like we're going to go right down here to the restaurant and we're going to have class and we're going to go get some drinks and we're going to get them like nachos and stuff. And, you would not get that at a bigger school, but I did. So I went to Texas Tech for my master's. But when you're working on your master's, your class sizes are a lot smaller.
That's different,
but yeah, so I love that experience and having those relationships with the professors, versus going to a large university and not having that experience. And I think that's probably beneficial to you and I as well as teachers, because then we provide that to our students.
Yep, of course.
Because we wanted that as a student. Now we can give that back. So talk about your journey in becoming a teacher. You talked about you had some stops. You went to California. You were a teacher, but I'm talking more about somewhere in your life. You talked about how you never thought you would become a teacher. So just talk a little bit about your journey and when it kind of clicked in your head. Was there a moment? Was there an experience? Was there a teacher? What shaped you and turned you into this idea of becoming a teacher?
So what I think it was is, so after high school, what I did was I began coaching cheerleading at the middle school and high school levels in Alpine, and being able to see how my cheerleaders grew from the start to the end of the season was what I enjoyed the most. So doing that, having them ask, are you going to come back? Are you going to come back? We love the way you coach. I think that's initially what drove me to go into the master's program for education, just to see the growth and the potential that I had to maybe just expose students, to what is out there. And I feel like after student teaching, that's when it was like, okay, this is what I really do enjoy. The kids are great. It's something different every single day. Of course, you have your ups and your downs, but for the majority, it's all good. So I think that is initially what set me over the edge. And then having a positive first year experience in California, I knew that it's something that I really did want to continue pursuing and get good at.
So when you were helping out, you said middle school with cheer, you were not teaching at that time, were you?
No, so I was going to school at the time.
Okay,
so
you were
as I
like
was in
full
college,
time, and then you were just kind of helping out. Now, when you were going to
Exactly.
school, what were you going to school for?
So my undergrad is in communication.
Right. So that's what I meant. So what were you thinking of that you were going to do?
I wasn't sure. So for the longest time, I felt like I was undecided. And then the more and more communication classes I taught, not teaching, I took, I think that's what initially led me down that path, just seeing how to communicate with people, to create those relationships, to create that networking that I think a lot of us take for granted, I feel. So initially when I started and got my teaching degree, my first test, my first certificate was in speech communication for teaching. So, and then eventually it evolved, and when it saw how similar it was to English, and so I also did English.
Gotcha. All right. Well, very good. Well, so I'd like to ask you a little bit more of an in-depth kind of question now that you have been teaching. So this is your 6th year teaching?
This is my 5th year.
Your 5th year and your first at Steele. So, okay. I got you. It's a very general question, so you can take it wherever you want to take it. Okay. But I always like to ask people, why is it that you teach?
Why is it that I think it's a lot of informing and exposing students to maybe things that they never would have been exposed to if it hadn't been for school. I know a lot of the subjects and now more evolving subjects and topics that we are choosing to teach is the only way that these students are getting educated on certain subjects. So making sure that that information is coming out, I don't want to say correctly, but more in a positive manner than a negative manner that you might see on, social media or TV.
Right.
And having those open conversations and saying that it's okay to have those conversations, and to make sure that these conversations that they have with people outside of school are also in a positive light and not in such a negative light like we have been seeing everywhere on social media.
Right. So what you're saying is that although you teach English, you're using your platform as an educator, as a teacher, to take the opportunities to find ways to bring in life into your classroom through your content.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Very good. I love it. What's your definition of success in your classroom?
Ooh, definition of success. Definitely, if they are providing me with everything that they have, regardless of their grade in the class, if they're giving me their all, then they are being successful. Again, grades, just a number. If you come out learning something, then I feel that you are successful. I feel like I have accomplished something. Again, looking back, was I the best English student? Probably not. But here I am teaching English, and I think we look back at our high school careers and we see ourselves in our students and seeing what could you have done as a student, or what could your teacher would have done when you were a student that made your high school experience better. And so I always reflect back on that and try to present that to them. Hopefully.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic outlook, because that's so true. And I think that's why this profession is a calling for us.
Yes.
Because we all have a story to tell. And some teachers are more vulnerable and transparent than others. I am very transparent in front of my students. I tell them exactly my life story, what my upbringing was like, because you never know who is going to connect to that story. And I'm one of 7 teachers, one of 7 teachers, because they go from my class to maybe your class or whatever. And you might be able to connect and relate to a student that's male or female better than I can based on your story. But I think it's our duty, and I think it's our responsibility to be transparent for these kids, because we are the bridge between that youthful and I'm not going to use the word innocent, but that youthful, I don't know what the word on English teacher, I need your help here. Just the youthfulness of somebody, and then like young adulthood. Like we're that bridge that we're helping them cross to what the real world is going to be like, the reality of what this world is going to bring them. It's a tough world. It's not easy.
It is.
And so when we share our experiences and we share our failures and we let them know that we're human and we make mistakes, but we learn from them, that's what's important. That's what's important for these kids. And I think it's important for us to share that with our students. And you mentioned the fact that when you see growth in your kids, because we're not all perfect.
Exactly.
I always say that, all doctors didn't make 100 on their test to become a physician. So there's some doctors out there that are really good at their job, but they didn't do really well, but they did well enough to pass.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing. And I think you're right. When we look at numbers in terms of success, I think that's the wrong measure. I think the proper measure is the measure of growth. And even if that's a kid from making a 60 in your class who failed, but you may not have known that last year they made a 50. And so like, there's growth there. What caused that growth? Maybe it was you. Maybe it was you as their teacher, just talking about life and bringing the world into your content. We have to celebrate growth and not celebrate the A and the B, and whatnot. So very good answer. So taking you back to your educational career, elementary, middle school, high school, and I'd kind of like to keep it there versus college. Who was a teacher that you will always remember, and what about them made them so special to you?
I have a couple. I had some really, really great teachers growing up when I was in Laredo. And even to this day, we're Facebook friends now. So I get to go back and, talk about the past and what they did as teachers. But honestly, just them being genuine in the class, just doing the small stuff that ended up being the long lasting memory, like having lunch in your class, being able to read that book with you in your class, having that snack time. So it wasn't necessarily the core subjects that they taught that they were good teachers, but it was the smaller stuff, the minor stuff that maybe at times we overlook or that we take for granted. And again, as students, it's second thought. It's like, oh, I just like her because we did get to do this or whatever.
Right.
But those are the small stuff that I remember.
Yep.
And hopefully, again, COVID this year, it's a little harder, but hopefully start implementing that with my students and making sure that they understand that, again, I'm not here just as a teacher. I'm not only here as your English teacher, but if you need something, that I'm there for you too.
Right. So. Absolutely. Was there, now you didn't mention the teacher's name, but was there a standout teacher in your career though, that you'll never forget?
Again, there's so many. I have Miss Hayhurst, I have Mrs. Garippa, I have Mrs. Vyatt, I have like a whole list, honestly, that I could just go on and on about. So to just pick one, it's impossible.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It is definitely tough. I thought about, this crossed my mind yesterday, because I always ask this question to people on the podcast. Although this podcast is called Keeping Up with the Knights, I was like, man, how cool would it be for me to interview one of my favorite teachers, right? But then it's like, okay, well, that's not that podcast. I'd have to like create another podcast.
A whole different podcast, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm not going to bring them on this show, this podcast. But I've thought about that. I think it'd be really neat to do that. But all right, so you have been teaching now for 5 years, and I know that that's not a long time, but it's long enough where you've had some experiences with some students who have come from all walks of life, some students that you may have impacted yourself, or just a story where that maybe education has impacted this kid for the better. So with that being said, can you share a story of a pivotal moment in your educational career that you will always remember?
So recently,
obviously without sharing names, right? We want to keep the privacy of the kid. But.
So again, like I said, I had the pleasure of teaching freshmen, sophomores, and junior. And my first year of teaching, I taught sophomores. And they were like, Miss Smietana, are you going to teach juniors next year? And I was like, no, I'm not going to teach juniors next year. And never say never. What happened the following year, I ended up teaching them again. A lot of them come back as my teaching assistants. So in California, we have, if they have an open schedule or an open spot, they're allowed to pick a teacher that they would like to, in a way, do some clerical work for them.
That's awesome.
So I had a couple students come back. So after that year, I went to freshmen after the juniors. And then this class, the same thing happened. Are you going to teach sophomores next year? And I was like, no, I'm not going to teach sophomores next year. So that year, I actually had that class freshman, sophomore, and junior year.
Oh, wow.
So if I would have stayed in California, there would have been a possibility of, teaching them again for the fourth year. And so I actually had an email from a student who asked me, Miss Smietana, can you write me a letter of recommendation? And this was like the last person that I thought I was going to get this email from.
Don't you love those?
I do. And in my mind, I was like, no way. This kid is not asking me for a letter of recommendation.
Right.
And so he goes on to explain why I should write this letter of recommendation for him. And so he goes on to say, I know that I was not the best student in your class. However, I know that you saw me grow from freshman, sophomore, and junior year. So it would be nice for you to explain that to me, or explain that to the board on how you've seen me at my worst, but yet grow into who I am now. So after I read that, I was like, how can you say no to that?
Right. Yeah.
So the fact that I reached at least one student makes me happy, and I'm doing something right, at least for that one person.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. In this profession, those are the opportunities that we have as teachers to be edified and know that we're in the right profession.
Yes.
It just takes one. It's the simplicity of just being recognized for our work as teachers, that it goes beyond the content of what we're teaching in the classroom. It's about impacting kids.
Yes.
And so it's definitely a great moment when we have those. Let's go a little more lighthearted here. Just ask you a real simple question. So what do you do for fun? What are some of your hobbies, that you do?
So again, I'm very new to the area. I have yet to explore. I do enjoy competing in 5K races. Again, not to necessarily compete, but to complete. Yeah. I enjoy hiking a lot. There was a lot of trails out in California, so I'm happy and ready to look for some trails here. I don't have any kids, or I'm not married, but I do have two nephews one's about to be 2, one is 3.5. So they keep me very busy.
They're here?
Yes, they're here. Okay. Yes. Okay. Other than that, basically I just bought a new house, so I'm enjoying staying at home.
That's exciting.
Becoming a homebody. But I like being active, definitely.
Okay. I got you. Well, if you didn't know this about me, I'm an avid runner. I run lots of marathons, and I do Spartan races, and
that's awesome.
Physical fitness is definitely, I used to be a personal trainer. So I definitely enjoyed that. And you'll occasionally see me outside after school running the track and running the bleachers. So especially in the spring, I usually have about 6 or 7 teachers that will join me after school, and
nice.
And we do cardiovascular workouts, and then we'll go inside the weight room and we'll do like a 15-20 minute quick workout. So you're more than welcome to join us when that time comes.
Most definitely. I would definitely take you up on that offer.
Good deal. All right. So in terms of, the quote unquote, like poster child of a teacher, right? What makes a teacher amazing?
Oh, I think it varies, because I've had those teachers who are so strict by the book. They're there to teach you something, not necessarily to get to know you, who I feel like did an amazing job. But also I feel like there's, those teachers who try to get to know you, build that relationship with you, and again, still stick with me to this day. So I think it varies. I think again, I don't think there's any one word to say this is what makes an exceptional teacher. I also think if I were to say what makes an exceptional teacher is just caring enough that your student knows what they need to be doing to get it done, to making sure that you're on top of that student. And again, just giving your all to that student.
Absolutely. And I think that, in this world of education, we're not critiqued and analyzed on that. We're critiqued and analyzed, and as you know, as a core teacher, by the scores. But the impacts that we have on kids and the relationships that we have on kids, and you being able to see the growth in your students, where is that measured? Where do we get the pats on the back for that? And that's kind of one of the things that I feel is challenging in education, which actually brings up my next question to you. So it's on point. What do you think are the biggest challenges are in education?
The biggest challenges, I would say, is how the states are expecting us to do whatever it takes for each individual student, yet them as making mandatory, state tests only test children one way.
Yep.
So it's a huge contradiction to what they expect us to do and then what they're doing. So I feel like there needs to be some sort of balance. There needs to be a better understanding between states and teachers who are in the trenches doing the work, seeing the growth. But again, I was a kid who tested terribly. I was a terrible test taker.
I was too, right there.
And it's like, how are you going to measure a kid and their knowledge and what they learn on one test?
Right.
So I think that's where the disconnect is. If you continue letting teachers teach the way they want to teach, what they want to teach without having that hanging over their head,
right,
it'd be a world difference.
Yeah, no, well said. I mean, you in being a elective teacher, I don't have to fall under the umbrella of having some kind of test held over my head. But at the same time, we have capstone certification programs where, as a junior and senior year in my medical assisting class, like you've been in my classes for the last 2 or 3 years, our job is to get you to pass this exam. But at the same time, if they fail, there's no repercussions. They're still going to graduate. They just didn't pass that exam. But that's very well said, because as a teacher, we had the flexibility to some extent to teach how we want to teach, but then you're only going to analyze them by one way. What do you personally do to improve as a teacher?
I think a lot of self-reflection. I ask the kids a lot, what could I have done better to support you? What do I need to do this time around to support you? Where did I go wrong? And again, if I think that I'm doing my job to the best of my ability, but not getting the results that I want, obviously I'm the problem, not the kids. So I think self-reflection is definitely a huge part of me growing as a teacher and making sure that I am perfecting my craft in that.
So if you could see the hair standing up on my arms, you'd see them standing up right now, because I love what you just said. Have you ever read the book called Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I'm glad that you said yes, because that's where your answer, whether you have had that answer prior to reading her book or not, is the whole point to that book. It's that growth mindset piece where we have to introspectively look at ourselves and be able to critique and analyze what we did well and what we didn't do well. But see, I think a lot of times, whether it's a student or teachers in this profession, we want to think of ourselves as being perfect. And especially during the pandemic and COVID, and we're teaching kids, our stress levels are out of the roof. And that's my personal self-reflection is when I feel that onset of stress coming on, it's because I'm a perfectionist and I'm type A oriented and I'm OCD and I want control to the best of my abilities, right? I just have to remind myself, you don't have to be perfect in this profession. Yeah. It's not about my content. It's not about the lesson. If I forgot to post a lesson on Google Classroom, The kids are still going to live. They'll still be looking for that lesson the next day. Things are going to be okay. They're going to work out. It's about connecting to these kids and allowing them to trust me as their teacher. But actually, 2016, I was district teacher of the year for this district and high school teacher of the year here at Steele High School. And after that, I started getting into public speaking, and I would go into different school districts and different departments, and I would go speak. And my presentation is called Maybe It's Not Your Students, Maybe It's You. 25 reasons why you might suck as a teacher.
Yeah.
And that's my presentation. And there's a lot of comic in there. So it's lighthearted. It's not, I mean, it's the title that pulls people in. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I would always say is, you know, if you want to know if you're a good teacher, ask your worst student. And by worst student, I'm talking about your most challenging student, the student.
There's always that one.
There's that one, right?
Always.
If you ask that student what they think of you, first of all, it takes a certain kind of a teacher to ask that question. Mm-hmm. Most teachers don't want to ask that question because they're fearful of the answer.
Yep.
But the growth-minded teacher, you and I value what that person has to say so that I can improve, right? Mm-hmm. And so actually one day, it was a couple of years ago, I set up a camera in my room next door. I have like a skills lab up here. And I said, this is a volunteer basis, but I want you to go in there. If you're willing, go in there with a friend. Your friend hits record, and I want you to tell me one thing that I did that had a positive impact on you. And I want you to tell me one thing that I did that sucked. Like I was not effective. I did something, whatever. And I was just blown away by their volunteerism because they all went in there and they all went in there and gave me one thing I did well and one thing I did bad. And my challenge to anybody listening to this podcast would be try it.
Try it. Mm-hmm.
Maybe in written form, mm-hmm. maybe in video form, whatever it is that you want to do, give your students an opportunity
to tell you,
yeah, so that the next year you can correct it and be better. But see, that's the growth-minded teacher. And some people are not. They're fixed mindset and they don't care because they feel that they're the best at their job, that they don't need improvement. And I think that's where some people go wrong. So I'm really glad that you said that. And I think that's a great answer. All right. So we are kind of approaching our hour in a little bit. So I'll just go a couple of more questions and we'll wrap things up. You good with that?
Yep.
All right. So one question I always like to ask, and I think I know your answer, but just kind of elaborate on it a little bit, is do you think that relationships should be at the center of teaching and education? And if so, what things, some concrete, some kind of objective things that you specifically do in your classroom back that up?
So again, relationships are everything. I think there needs to be a firm understanding between student and teacher. Okay, this is when we need to get to business, it needs to be business. When we have downtime, when we're able to, get to know each other a little bit more, have those conversations of, how's life? Is everything okay? Then once we get to that point, I feel that's when the learning starts. I feel like I've been able to do that currently with nighttime. Nighttime, I see the difference between how my class engages during English and how we interact during nighttime and how my grades in 7th period for English are doing so much better than my other classes.
Wow.
And I think it's because we have that time to just, English aside, let's get to know one another.
Yep.
Let's who's the class clown? Who's the one who's going to be, vocal? Who's the one who's going to start the arguments? Who's who within the class? And even within each other, I had kids passing back papers and 7th period knew everybody and everybody else in my other classes, they were like, who's who? Yeah. So again, the correlation between the relationships and learning is definitely vital. And I'm very grateful for nighttime, getting to know my seventh period. But at the same time, it irks me a little bit because I don't have that with my other classes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
of course, it's the time that we're given, whatever. But I do appreciate, and it's makes me happy to see. Okay, this is what I need to make sure that I try a little bit harder with my other classes because I don't have that time.
Right.
So trying to figure out how to incorporate that, that's been my struggle lately.
I tell you what, I'm blown away, and I'm so happy that we're doing this podcast, because what you just said right there is, I don't have seventh period because I'm a coach, and so that's my conference period. But I know exactly what you're talking about, and the impact that you can have on a kid by just getting to know them outside of your content.
Yeah.
And so my challenge to you and to everybody else is, figure out a way that you can make it work for your other classes to get to know them for you, but then allow them to get to know each other, and it doesn't take a long time. You and I have modeled what to do with your kids. So in my class, one of the things, and I do a lot of different things to get to know my kids, but one of the things that I do is what we did in the very beginning of this podcast. They get to ask coach whatever question they want to. And if it's the beginning of the period, I just go off of my own emotion. Like, I just feel like I need some engagement. I need some connection. I just pause. I stop everything. Guys, put your phone down, put your book, flip it over, close it. I don't care what you're doing. It's Q&A time. Ask away. What do you want to ask me? I'm serious when I say this. I'm very transparent. I tell them, don't hold back. Ask me those questions, because it's an opportunity for me to talk about life. Talk about relationships. These kids they're dating. They need to hear, well, they'll call it dating, right? Whatever you want to call it. But they need to hear from a man who's married, family life, relationships, caring, respecting females, and females hear what it sounds like to hear a man talk about a woman, and that's just the relationship piece. Now let's talk about the trials and the triumphs that we have in life. Those are those opportunities. And if you just do that in your classroom for your other periods and take 2 minutes for kids to ask you 5 questions, they get to know you. And then the next day, flip it on them. All right, hey, John, what's your favorite ice cream? And then everybody's like, ooh, gross, or like, that's mine. And so you're allowing them to connect. It doesn't take a long time, but you can do that through Q&A. But I love what you're doing during seventh period. And I think that actually kind of adds a question to my list of interview questions now. I want to know what other teachers are doing during nighttime. Because and assuming they have class, I'm really curious to know what they're doing, because it's either an opportunity lost or it's an opportunity taken.
Yeah.
So good job for you, and kudos to you. Well, let's wrap this up with my last question. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch any of my episodes, but the last question I have is always to ask you, who would you like to thank on campus? Another teacher that has welcomed you, that has helped you, that has assisted you, and you'd like to give them a shout out on this podcast. But before you answer, if you haven't had a chance to listen to the episodes, please subscribe. Everyone listening to this episode, subscribe so that we can get to know each other. But all right, go ahead. Who would you like to thank and why?
There's a list. Not just
one.
There's a long list. Okay.
You gotta go one.
So of course, the first person who showed me around, I ended up taking her classroom. And that's Catherine Barden.
Okay.
She was amazing. She was the first person I met on campus. She showed me around. She toured me, and she was like, this is my classroom, and it's going to be yours. And she, again, moving here, I didn't have a single thing. My pod was in California for months. So she handed me literally a finished and complete classroom, and I couldn't thank her enough. Next, of course, the amazing English department. Everybody in the English department has been so amazing. Of course, Coach Locke and John Zimmerman have been an amazing team to work with. And I could not have been blessed enough than with having them as my collaborators. Coming into a new school, it's always everybody's fear is like, oh, am I going to get along with the people I work with? Is it going to be, am I going to you have so many worries going through your mind. And I have been lucky enough to not have any of those worries because of the people that I work with. So I'm very, very blessed.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you said that, because I think that's going back to when I was thinking about doing this podcast. I've been here for 15 years. The school's been open for 16 and I've been here for 15. This is the only place I've ever worked. When I first started teaching, this is the first place I came to. And I've seen now 3 different principals. They've all been amazing. They've all been fantastic. I've seen teachers retire. I've seen teachers come and go. But one thing that I know for sure about Steele High School is that this is an amazing place. And at one point I'm like, is this too good to be true? Is it because this is the only school I've been to and this is all I know? Like, are all schools like this? And I've learned through conversations and just networking and talking to people. No, not every school is like this. And the fact that you in your first year here can give a shout out to an entire department for welcoming you, a new teacher from California, says a lot about our faculty.
It does.
It says a lot about our staff, and it talks a lot about our leadership that we have here. And so that's my purpose behind this podcast, is to share your story, to allow people to get to know you, but also to let people outside of this school, because it is a YouTube channel as well as an Apple podcast. Anybody could be listening to this, and just sharing y'all's stories and giving shout out to people just kind of edifies who we are as a faculty and staff here at Steele High School. So shout out to the English department, and shout out to my new neighbor, because Miss Barden is my next door neighbor. She's literally like right there next door. So I will definitely, I'm not going to tell her, but I don't know if you've seen my emails. I usually show a little glimpse of who the shout outs are for. So she'll definitely be getting this, but hey, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking some time out of a half day to sit and visit with me. And you and I, right before I gave you the microphone, have never met before.
Yep, never met before.
And for several people that I said I was doing an interview, and I said your name wrong. I said Miss Smietana, and it's Miss Smietana.
Tana, yes.
They were like, who? And I said, do you hear what you just said? That's why I'm doing this podcast. So hopefully they will tune in and listen to your interview as well. Don't be a stranger. Thank you for taking your time. I hope you have a blessed day and a great weekend.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Keeping Up with the Knights. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure you subscribe and click the notification button so you know when the next episode is released, and then share it with your friends and colleagues. If you're so inclined to do so, would you please rate and review this podcast to help me grow our community of listeners? I hope there was something that you heard today that allowed you to connect outside the classroom. Now, more than ever, we need each other as a support system, and we need to continue to make this the best high school in the state of Texas. Thank you, Knight Nation. Now, go be someone's champion today.